Hello my friends, I'm going to read you a story that I wrote. I'd like to emphasize at the outset that this is pure fiction, but just a little story that has a kind of a theocratic basis and just entertainment really. So it's not an experience, please don't think it's an experience, it's just a fictional story. It's called Every Decision. The idea of this story really is to show that every decision we make has consequences, and they could be good or bad. In this case, they were good. So it's called Every Decision. The rather stately looking elderly lady sat in her garden on the beautiful May day with her seat placed under the shade of the old apple tree. It was such a beautiful day. The only clouds in the stunningly blue sky were tiny wispy white ones that she thought looked like yachts sailing in the sea. She put the Thomas Hardy novel she'd been reading down on the grass and looked up at the branches and leaves of the tree that allowed diffused light to fall more gently on her old skin than the direct light. After having chemotherapy, she had to be careful about that, and she knew that once again she had cause to be grateful to the tree. The blossom was beautiful this year, and she always enjoyed seeing it burst into colour. But with so many other older people though, her mind and her heart combined could become a time machine, and she was transported back to the same spot. Not in 2016, but all the way back to 1946. Geraldine was just 20 years old then, married 1 year, and so her name had changed from O'Brien to Flynn. Her husband was Michael, and he'd amazed her by working out how they could buy an old house in the village of Moy in County Tyrone and do it up. Geraldine was expecting their first child. Before she knew she was pregnant, she decided to work at the garden, but now it was hard to do much. But he, on the other hand, was busy with the house, but needed a shed for his tools, and he'd chosen the spot that he wanted to place it. He was about to dig up the sapling tree standing just 2 feet tall when Geraldine had brought him out a cup of tea. A look of alarm had spread all over her pretty face. "What are you doing, Mike?" "I need to clear the ground here to build my shed." "No, Mike, not there, please. And I think that's an apple tree, and I discovered it the day I found out I was expecting our child." "Well, I'll move it then, over there." He pointed to a rough spot on the other side of the garden. "No, Mike, please. Here it'll get more sun and I'll be able to enjoy the blossom from the kitchen window." "Geraldine, this is the ideal spot for my shed." "Please, Mike, I really want the tree to be here. It means a lot to me." Mike shrugged. This wasn't like her, but he could see a very determined look on her face, and it obviously meant a lot to her. So he relented and decided to build the shed on the other side of the garden. He loved her, and though he really wanted the shed nearer the house, he'd give her what she wanted and make her happy. The tree grew quickly, as did the new child, and by the time the child was 4 there was fruit on it, and it continued to grow, as did baby Catherine, soon becoming little Kate, running around the garden with the speed of newly found legs and endless energy. The first day that Geraldine cut an apple from the tree, she shared it with the little girl, and she explained the wonders of how the fruit grew. Geraldine always marvelled at how it could be that soil, light, rain, and the tree could all work together to produce juicy, tangy, crispy fruit that was a delight to the taste buds. Watching the progress of the tree through spring, summer, autumn and winter became an important part of family life for the Flynn household. And when young Peter was born in early August, he was soon introduced to the very healthy looking mature apples on the branches of the tree in 1952. Much was happening in the household. Michael had finally had something of a breakthrough in his career as a painter, that is, an artist. His father had advised him not to pursue a career that he described as air and feathers. "Go get an apprenticeship or something," he'd said. But Michael had chosen to go to art college, and there in Dublin he'd met her. Geraldine was at the centre of education herself. She worked there as a cleaner, but an elderly professor had found a notebook full of her poetry, and being a kindly man, he'd insisted on helping her along the road to publishing. He saw her talent, so she was soon writing poems and short stories that were acclaimed in Ireland, Britain, and in America. One of her poems had been praised by the Taoiseach, Ireland's Prime Minister, for its clarity and insight into Ireland's history and culture. Before Peter was old enough to attend schools, her anthology of children's poems would be in all the schools in Ireland on both sides of the border, and her apple tree poem of only 10 simple lines would be on the lips of many of Ireland's children. There may not have been too much money in the Flynn household, but there were many paintings and some beautiful literature. In 1958, Michael Flynn, or as he was known in the world of art now, Mickey Flynn, had been hurled forward as the artist all wanted to buy after his abstract painting The Apple Tree, with its complex design of apple leaves and apples in the brightest of colours, had sold for 100 times the price Michael would have been pleased to receive for it. It seemed that his bold style, mixing well-known natural shapes with bizarre colours, bright and bold, had an appeal in this rapidly changing world. One summer's eve, as the family sat under the now taller apple tree, they discussed how the young tree had already inspired a poem and a painting that had changed their lives for the better. How glad Michael was that he'd not removed that sapling, but had put his shed, where his studio was now, on the far side of the garden. They sat there sipping wine and listening to the blackbirds singing in the tree above, and Geraldine expressed her thought that really the apple tree was just like an extension of their family. As the years tumbled forward, the tree was always there, figuring in their lives. The children had a swing fixed to its long branch that stretched away from the house, and the seasons also showed in the children as they grew, and the tree grew with them. Young Peter won an essay prize for counting to around 10-year-old children with his account of how an apple tree watched the goings-on in a village street. His parents treasured his achievement and were not surprised that by 12 he'd made up his mind he was going to be a journalist. Kate too was influenced by the tree and pursued biology, and was soon married to the son of a local apple farmer. But there was something much more important to come. Geraldine was at home one morning in 1986 alone. Mickey, now in his mid-60s, was involved in running art classes at the Maze prison. That's where he was. He felt that if he could get people to paint their feelings rather than feel the need to fight with guns and bombs, it would improve the situation in the northern counties of Ireland that people had been suffering for about 2 decades. Geraldine opened the door, and there were that couple who'd called a few days before and left her some magazines. She was a little surprised they were back so quickly, but she'd liked them, even though she had no real interest in the message they seemed to want to spread everywhere. In honesty, she couldn't even remember where she'd put the magazines. She hadn't read them. But because she believed in the value of Irish hospitality, she brought them in, and they were soon sipping tea and enjoying apple jelly jam on homemade scones. She listened patiently while they talked to her about the only real hope for peace being the kingdom of God. But she wasn't really taking the information in. When they offered her a book called You Can Live Forever, she declined, stating that whilst they were very nice people, she had her own ideas. She didn't bother much with conventional religion, and she hated what it had done to Ireland. She felt best and most at peace with nature, maybe with God, when she was in a wild place or sitting under the apple tree. So she didn't really want the young couple to waste their time on someone who was not interested. Yet she poured them more tea. It was the young man Nigel who commented on the tree that he could see through the window. "What a magnificent apple tree," he said, "and so laden with fruit." "Would you like some? We've plenty, and our daughter now lives on an apple farm down the road near Armagh, so we've always got lots of apples here." As the young couple left, clutching a large bag of bright, ripe apples, the young lady called Stephanie handed her the large red book. "Listen, Geraldine, you've kindly given us some apples, and I don't have anything to give you, but would you please take the book as a wee present from us?" Then she laughed, her pretty blue eyes sparkling. "We won't keep calling if you don't want us to, but you might enjoy the book. It only teaches really what the Bible says. And you might get a few surprises." After they'd gone, Geraldine should have been getting on with some writing and then thinking about preparing food, but she sat under the tree with the book, and to her amazement, she couldn't put it down. She looked up at the sunlight dappled leaves and said out loud, "Paradise on earth. No, it couldn't be. Could it?" Mickey came home and she was still sitting under the tree with her eyes drawing the information into her brain like a well-designed pump. Her mind was racing. The kingdom, a government, God had a name and he's called Jehovah. The dead are dead. The soul is not immortal. She didn't even hear Mickey until he commented from the back door, "Well, that must be some book, Mrs. Flynn." He laughed and was actually pleased to see her relaxing. As they prepared food together, he told her about the prisoners in the maze, one who was there for killing 3 soldiers. He had amazing artistic skills which he hadn't even realised. If nothing else, he joked, when he gets out in about 10 years, the murals on the gable walls in West Belfast will improve some. "The thing is, though," he said, "he seems such a nice guy. It's so sad what these troubles have done to us all." As they ate the very rich salad together, he asked about the book and she told him about the visitors. He was rather sceptical, but she said, "Come on, Mick, don't judge what you've not examined. Read some of it first." She was so shocked at how she'd changed her mind already and wanted to know more. For his part, in bed that night, he started to read the chapter that explained why there was suffering in the world. Then he looked at the discussion of the Bible and why it could be trusted. She was asleep when he put the book down, but something was already growing in his heart. It was the desire to know more. Over the next few days, they both read most of the book, and she said she wished she had asked them to come back. A week and a half later, Geraldine was shopping in Curly's supermarket in Dungannon when a voice behind her said, "I have to tell you, you're growing the nicest apples I've ever tasted." Turning round, she saw Stephanie with a shopping trolley half full. "And I have to tell you, young Stephanie, you distribute the most interesting book I've ever read in my life." The mutual delight that flowed between them was almost visible, and arrangements were made. The young couple would call on Monday night, and that became every Monday night. And soon the Flynns were at the meetings in the rented room the couple called the Kingdom Hall, where a small congregation met regularly for meetings. Over the next 2 years, the Flynns and their offspring were all baptised, along with Kate's apple farming husband and the as yet unmarried Peter, who was a Belfast journalist. As the years passed, there were the joys of grandchildren at the apple farm, and Peter, now a full-time minister, married another pioneer called Sinead from County Donegal. So the years had passed, but a widow now, elderly Geraldine, herself dealing with cancer, thought back through the history of the tree and how it had been involved right through their lives, and how it had even led to her taking the book that set them on the road to life. Past the worst of mourning and able to enjoy her memories, she thanked Jehovah that she had decided the tree had to stay, and that Mickey had allowed her to keep it there by the kitchen door. She smiled as she thought back to the talk he'd given her at the convention in Dublin, just shortly before he died, in which he'd used the story about the apple tree to show how far-reaching decisions can be in affecting our lives for better or worse. She was so happy that now there was a 4th generation of the family growing up and choosing the best way of life as a career. She looked up at the tree, listening to the buzzing of the bees amid its blossom. As she contemplated the amazing ecosystems the Creator had designed, including the apple tree, in her thoughts, she prayed silently that in the future promised paradise she might be allowed to plant an orchard from the seeds of her tree and preserve it into the eternal future, just as it had been used to bring not just good fruit and shade, joy and pleasure, but the kingdom hope and life to them. She smiled as she thought that it really did not matter what happened to her. The future was secure because the God who cannot lie and whose name is Jehovah had promised it. The wind gently stirred the leaves of the tree, and elderly Geraldine already felt like a young lady living in Paradise Earth. I finished that today and wanted to share it with you. I don't mind if you share it with other people, as long as they know it's only a story and not an experience, if you think it's worth sharing. When I wrote it, I was thinking though about some actual experiences that we had where we called with somebody, left a book or left a magazine, some literature, and when we went back, their whole attitude had changed because their hearts had been affected what they read. And those same people are still serving Jehovah decades later. Maybe I should tell you about them some other time. Thanks for being patient enough to listen to a story. I just like to do this because my imagination gets going and it's nice to share something with you, and I hope it made you a little bit happy. Lots of love to you, everybody who took the time to listen. Isn't it a joy to be serving Jehovah? Love from Kate and I, from Ireland. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.